Hello everybody, this is the Introverted Astrologer and I'm back with my series on the royal family. Today we're concentrating on Prince William. Our prince has worked extremely hard over the last couple of years. He's coped with the crisis surrounding his father's health, but also his wife too. And so he's taken on a tremendous amount of extra responsibility. Is 2026 going to be a kingmaker for our prince? He does have some extremely important progressions which are becoming ripe, and these will carry on culminating over the next couple of years. So let's have a look at his chart now and I'll show you what I'm referring to. Here we have Prince William's natal chart, and what a fine chart it is. Very sensitive energy here, being amplified across the ascendant axis. Like Catherine, he shares that very strong family focus because of the sun and moon both being in the sign of Cancer. And just like the princess, he too has the overall signature of cardinal air, which is Libra. And so between them we can see the strong emphasis on Libran tact and diplomacy in their relationships. It's quite stunning when you look at this chart, quite how strong all his planets are. Because Neptune and the Sun are so close to an angle, that gives them accidental dignity, and similar goes for Jupiter in Scorpio upon his midheaven. The moon is in Cancer, which is where it feels very much at home. Saturn is exalted in Libra. Venus is at home in Taurus, and the same goes for Mercury. This is something that we see repeated across the royal charts, with planets falling in their natural homes or in a dignified, exalted position. These are very strong charts, but we do need to bear in mind that where you have so many planets placed in their domicile or exaltation or falling on an angle, that then gives the planet much greater power, but you then have to manage that part of your life more strongly. It would be a little bit like comparing every planet to a highly valuable antique car, which you have parked at your house and you need to maintain it and keep it in pristine condition. That's time consuming and it comes with responsibilities and duties. And if every one of these planets was a highly expensive antique car that you had to maintain, you can quickly work out that much of your life would be consumed with the kind of care that needed to be taken. So there is also a downside to having so much strength in a chart. There are a couple of very significant things taking place in Prince William's progressions. Some of them are ripe, even as we speak now. So I want to pull you over to his 9th and 10th houses, because we have this clustering of planets here, and so they've all been moving forward slowly. If we inch forwards one day in our ephemeris for every 1 year that the prince has been alive. Some of these progressions are extremely prominent right now. His natal Mars has gradually inched forward until it has come to conjunct his Jupiter. At the time of recording, Mars has progressed to 0 degrees and 36 minutes of Scorpio, and so it has just slightly overshot his Jupiter, but we are still within the corridor of time when this might express itself. That same Mars has also been forming an easy trine aspect with his natal Sun. If we consider that progressed Mars is about our unfolding executive ability, our drive and our decision making, as it comes to fuse with Jupiter, this part of ourselves is amplified greatly. We are probably highly confident. We're assertive. We are moving from careful preparation into the area of confident execution. And so increasing authority, public growth, greater power. These are all likely expressions. This Jupiter also happens to be the prince's ruling planet because it rules his Sagittarius ascendant. So this is very important. And Jupiter too has also inched forward in the progressions and is now sitting on the exact degree of his midheaven. His midheaven is 2 degrees and 26 minutes, and Jupiter has progressed to 2 degrees and 29 minutes. This is such a strong and auspicious sign for our public role that one might even wonder, is this the moment when the prince is made king? When a transit from Jupiter passes over the midheaven, this often marks a highly auspicious time in the career, and it's one of the hallmarks of potential success. But I've looked at all the royal charts, and I think what we're actually seeing is a time when William becomes increasingly important. The duties that he is taking on have much greater public visibility than was the case a few years ago. He's been able to take on more and more very visible royal duties, for example, meeting with Donald Trump. And I think this visibility is going to continue. It has been tremendously vitalising for him to have these progressions unfolding during the last 2 years when he suddenly had major things to juggle. For what it's worth, I'll just point out that this progressed Mars is actually the traditional ruler of his midheaven, and by 2029 it will exactly conjunct the midheaven. That's a few years away yet, but there's no question that all this activity becoming ripe on the midheaven marks a pivotal few years. Something very important is unfolding in his progressed lunation cycle, like the princess's, and this is because his progressed sun has moved from its natal position year on year and is now at almost 12 degrees of Leo. His progressed moon is down here in the Aries sign of Aquarius, and very soon this progressed moon will reach the point where it opposes the progressed sun. This means that whereas the princess is going to have a major new life cycle starting by virtue of a progressed new moon, the prince is going to have a major part of his life cycle activated shortly. It marks a pivotal point where the moon will soon oppose that progressed sun and form a full moon. This is major. It's immense. This is a progression that becomes exact this summer, but it builds in intensity. And so this is a phase where we can expect culmination, the bearing fruit of previous labours over more than a decade. Our public visibility is at an all-time high, and sometimes this can also coincide with illumination and recognition from the world around us. Those seeds which we've carefully nurtured for so long are in full bloom, and our role in the world will feel much more obvious. So this chart is bursting with potential for recognition, for expansion, and this remains the case for a good couple of years. There is one final, very important progression I want to draw your attention to, because William's ascendant has been progressing over the years. It has moved from that starting position of 27 odd degrees of Sagittarius, and now it has reached just under 22 degrees of Aquarius. So we're somewhere here. Now, by the end of 2026, this ascendant has moved a little further and is going to fall into a flowing trine position with his natal Pluto. Is this going to be significant? I think so, and the reason why is Pluto is the modern day ruler of his midheaven, but it is powerful in its own right. This is adding a level of deeply held inner confidence. There is leadership capacity. The energy flow is smooth, and our internal charisma, our subtle personal power is quite magnetic. Now, the likely corridor of time when this progression is expressing itself is roughly between autumn of 2026 through to spring of 2027. And it's just adding to all these weighty progressions, which are hinting at increased power, visibility, magnetism, and leadership. If we weigh up Prince William's transits this year, there is going to be some increased pressure from Saturn, because Saturn is moving through the sign of Aries now. And what will happen is that it will reach a position where it opposes the Prince's natal Mars and his own Saturn too. I'm particularly looking at this transit because it's going to be a lengthier one, which will take many months to unfold, and it's one that he's going to share with his wife, the Princess. They both have this same Mars in Libra, and this opposition from Saturn is going to be quite testing. It could feel a little bit like an internal pressure cooker, because for some reason the world around us and the officials in it, the people who are above us, are likely going to bring in some kind of duty or restriction which very much curtails our own will and what we want. So the pressure on our energy levels will be quite immense, and we will not be happy with this. However, the clear expression of our anger might not be possible. And in fact, with a Libra Mars, the direct expression of more hostile or aggressive emotions probably will be a struggle for us anyway. I find it interesting that his natal Mars falls in his 9th house. The 9th house is the place where we will find our broad philosophy on life, our faith, our spiritual persuasions perhaps, but it's also the place where we find long distance travel. And there was a similar dynamic going on with the Princess. So again, I wonder whether something is in the pipeline that is going to be very physically taxing for this couple. William's natal Saturn is going to be pulled into all of this as well. And so those Saturn keywords that we can think of, duty, patience, frustrations, restrictions, are part and parcel of this. This could be a time of testing, of an external assessment of how far we are coming along. We could be looking at our life structures more closely under this lengthy transit, perhaps assessing how strong the frameworks in our life are. This isn't a time of collapse. It's a time of carefully taking stock of what is in our life and assessing what dead wood might need cutting away. The Prince's chart isn't going to be affected by this year's eclipses in the way that Catherine is so strongly impacted. But there is something in his solar return which is interesting, so I'll take you there now. I'll just quickly show you the Prince's solar return, which began last June, and that was the point at which the Sun returned to the exact position it was compared to the day he was born. Because our solar returns span approximately 1 year until our next birthday, this solar return is still active for a few months until the Prince turns 44 this June. Now this is quite an intense solar return. We could see there being that heightened public visibility because the node is on the midheaven. Moreover, Mercury is on the ascendant and is in the exact same degree as the node. That's important, and so he has a strong impact on the environment around him, linking up with his visibility as a royal. The Sun is in the 12th house this year, and there is a fair bit of strain and pressure on this Sun. And I think that we can see behind the scenes of the 12th house, there could have been a heavy workload, the kind of pressures that we, the public, don't necessarily see. This Mars is in quite an intense formation here. We have the square with Uranus, and it's in a finger of God with the outer planets Pluto and Neptune. Saturn is joining in too. And so the strain on the Prince's energy levels and ability to act on his own initiative will have been very weighty. There may have been some things that he would have liked to have brought into being this year, but the pressures behind the scene have meant that this has been very difficult, with multiple forces which have been challenging him. We can also see that Pluto against the 8th house, which is almost exactly square to the moon, which is the chart ruler. Pluto is bringing in that great emotional intensity, possibly some power dynamics. There could have been pressure in personal relationships too, the personal relationships that come with a strong emotional load. So multiple things to juggle in this year, with high public visibility, but a lot going on behind the scenes. This solar return is showing us the moment the sun returns to its natal position, but this time we're looking at the picture from this June onwards. This is the Prince's 44th birthday, and we can see that public visibility is high this year because the sun is falling in the 10th house of Korea, of how the world sees us. Some of the very tight aspect patterns that we can pick up is this emphasis on Virgo, with a very public emotional moon in Virgo too. And so those Virgoan issues of service, of duties, of health, of responsibility are quite marked this year. And this is indeed some of the tightest aspects that we could make out in this return, because there is that partile trine with Mars. Mercury in the 11th is being pulled into. So we have a much easier alignment between what we want to achieve and our ability to carry it out. This was something that was checked in his previous solar return, but this year could be easier. And we have that emphasis on the 9th house of long distance travel again. This is a year when the Prince will find asserting his personal will much easier. We can pick up some tension here between the Sun, the Moon and Neptune. The Sun is saying something about the Prince's personal ambitions in the career spotlight. The Sun is telling us that this is a year when the Prince is in the limelight. He's out there in the public, and yet there's strain with this. It could be that the workload is very significant and starts sapping at our vitality. And on balance, we're looking at a step up in public responsibility, I suspect. We also know that Algol features quite prominently in the royal birth charts, and moreover, it's often apparent when there are significant changes or potentially crises. And we can see that this Mars in Taurus is in the area of Algol. And so we'll move over to compare this chart with the Prince's natal chart to see what is going on there. Now, one of the important things that I would look out for in a year which was pivotal and transformational would be a strong interplay between the angles of the solar return chart and those of the natal chart. So the angles are the ascendant, descendant, the midheaven. And I'm not sure if you can pick this up too, but between these different measurements, there's very little interplay. And so more than anything, this is suggesting to me that this is an intense year. It's a very public year. There is going to be pressure behind the scenes. And I think there could also be some rather intense moments in his personal relationships. Is this a year of huge, massive change? I suspect not. I think there will be an increase in the responsibilities that the Prince takes on, but he will be building up in resilience and public visibility. The level of challenge will be moderate, and I think we'll see much more of him and Princess Catherine out in public this year. I think the Prince is slowly taking on more duties. They are becoming more serious in their nature, and he's heading for a really busy period. There are major changes afoot over the next 3 years, and you'll understand what I'm driving at when you watch my video on the King and the Queen. That one will be with you tomorrow. And until then, take very good care, and God bless you all.